Welcome to the channel, That Retired Guy. Yeah, it's me, Darell, That Retired Guy. But, I've been thinking lately maybe I should change the name of this channel to That DIY Guy. Seems that most of my retirement's been spent doing handyman projects. Now, you know that comedian Red Green, he says, if the women don't find you handsome, make sure they find you handy. Anyway, this project is all about how to update those old stair rails. Now, you went to all the trouble of renovating the rest of your house, and now it's time to get those stair rails back into the 21st century. Now, in my case, our entryway and our living room floors were recently upgraded. We ripped them out and replaced all the carpet on the stairs and in the rec room. Now, the old stair railings and balusters, they really look out of place right now. It's time to give them a facelift. Now, as you can see, they're from the 1980s. They've seen better days. So let's go through this step by step. Okay, so the first step in any project is, of course, make a plan. And the plan needs to include the design, the materials, and logistics. Now, the design, that's what you want the finished product to look like. Based on that, you can make a list of all the materials you need. Now, lastly, before you start, give some thought to how you're going to do this. You know, what tools you might need, things like the sequence of tasks and the timing. Now, in my case, design, that was all about searching staircase images on the internet. There's a lot of them out there. Okay. After looking at dozens of staircase designs, I picked a more modern contemporary design. Well, I really should say we picked a design, right, sweetie? Of all the steps in any project, design is the most important one to get agreement on. It's the secret to no regret DIY. So in the end, we landed on a design that used black wrought iron balusters and square hardwood posts, with matching handrails. Okay, design locked in, now it's on to materials planning. This is often where many of the DIY community will start to put together a budget or a project cost estimate. Now, I have to admit right up front that this is not my strong suit. Now, I don't even think I've ever come close on my estimates. Project costs often come in at double what I expected. My sweetie knows just to double whatever I say. Now, when it comes to getting good deals on materials, that's my superpower. For example, when looking at black balusters, I was able to get these matching set of both stair and railing balusters at a clearance price. I paid just $7.50 each, where they normally cost like $30 each. That's a good savings when you have to buy dozens of them. The other thing I needed was some square newel posts and squared off handrails. I was able to get a special order of these from a local building supply store. A little pricey, but it's the design we wanted. So once you have a list of all the materials you're going to need, and before you dive in and start swinging a hammer, let's give some thought to how this is all going to play out. Do you have all the tools you're going to need? Do things have to be done in a certain sequence? Is there an order of operation, as my son Dan likes to say? With this DIY job, the tool list is pretty basic. Miter saw, sander, drill, wood staining equipment. But since I planned to embed the square balusters into the handrail and base plate, I had to order a set of square cut mortises. That's what these things look like. Now, these are not tools I've ever had to use in my 50 years of DIY, but I got to say they're kind of cool. I was able to get a set that included the exact size of the square balusters. So now the plan includes all the list of materials and tools that you're going to need, but don't forget to figure out the order of operation. For this project, I figured that the best sequence meant I should first sand, stain, and varathane all the wood. It's too difficult to do after everything is installed. I also decided that I would install the new handrail down the full length of the stairs before working on anything else. Also, for safety reasons, I decided to only do demolition of the upper railings when I'm ready to install the new ones. Taking a tumble into the stairwell would not be fun. Okay, so let's get started. So, materials acquisition. Shopping for building materials and tools is so much easier when that can be done online. You can search out the style, the price, availability at your local building centers, and don't forget Amazon. If somebody makes it, they probably sell it. As I mentioned, I got a great deal on wrought iron balusters from the big box retailer, and I was able to order the hardwood posts and handrails from Home Hardware. Only in Canada, eh? This is a Canadian chain that started in a Mennonite community in southern Ontario. It's now Canada-wide, a good thing since I'm doing this project on the west coast in BC. Now, one source I can recommend for wide selection of building materials, of course, is the Restore. This is a Habitat for Humanity charity, and it builds homes for needy families. They're both in Canada and the US, and I was able to get some hardware and trim materials at a great price. Now, the wood stain, sealer, and polyurethane top coats came from my local HD, Home Depot, and with the help of from an associate in the paint department, I was able to get a good color match to the flooring. We went through 4 or 5 stain colors, testing them on a piece of the handrail that I brought with me, and comparing them to a piece of our flooring. Now, in the end, it was worth the time invested. Okay, so now let's get to work. The third step, that would be finishing the wood. Now, I have to admit, sanding wood is not my favorite job. However, if you want to look and feel like a professional job, this is the key. Don't spend all that money on expensive hardwood posts and have the stain come out blotchy and uneven. No one likes a rough feeling handrail, so take your time. Now, I started out with 120 grit sandpaper and worked my way up to 220. A good electric sander will save you aches and pains, not to mention cutting down hours of monotony. Now, when your sanding is done, make sure you use a tack cloth to remove all the sanding dust before applying any kind of finish. I did some research on the type of wood that my posts and handrails were made from. Turns out that hemlock is one of the softest woods, or more accurately, one of the hardest softwoods. The only drawback for my project is that it tends to absorb stain unevenly. That means I don't want a blotchy finish, so I'm going to need to seal the wood before I stain it. Now, here you can see the difference between the raw wood and the sealed wood. Now, I took 2 coats of stain to get the desired depth of color and 4 applications of top coat Varathane. I used a water-based Varathane, and we opted for a matte finish on that. Now, don't forget sanding between each coat. I was using 220 grit sandpaper and 400 on the final coat. Again, don't forget that tack cloth. Now, I can't imagine how difficult all this would have been trying to do this after everything is installed. A little planning saves a lot of time. Now, the fourth step would be handrail installation. So before we take down all the railings, my plan was to install the handrails down the length of the stairs. I had purchased some nice beefy brackets from Amazon. They do have a great selection. Next, I had to figure out where to mount them. In BC, handrails have to be 90 to 107 centimeters above the stair nosing. That's 35.5 to 42 inches for my American friends. Check out your own local building codes on that to get it right. Mark the top and bottom bracket locations and install 1 continuous run of railing. Then space out the remaining brackets. Try to hit the wall studs each time. That way you're going to make sure you're going to get the weight-bearing strength you need. Now, step 5 is when we get to take down the old stair railings. Now, when you're going to do that, make sure there are no kids or pets around while you're doing this, and try to get it back at least to rough-in stage before the end of the day. The old railings and balusters, they were held together by screws hidden beneath the wooden caps, and it was no problem to remove the base screws and detach the handrail from the posts. That way I could pull out a whole section at a time. In no time, it's out with the old and in with the new. So first up, we installed the posts. There's a half post against the wall, and the 3 other posts are spaced out according to the layout of the balusters. By code, there's a maximum spacing between balusters of 4 inches. So you're going to have to do some math to figure out how many of those balusters to fit between your posts. I have 3 posts to install on the upper level. I chose to use those beefy metal plates to secure them to the floor. There are other options, but these work best for my application. It turns out that a little bit of grease goes a long way to help getting those long screws into the posts. Now, I admit I was a little concerned that the brackets might not be strong enough, but after I got them in and tried leaning on the posts, those suckers ain't going anywhere. Now it's time to get the flooring back in place and prepare the railing base plates for installation. I want those base plates to rise above the floor level, so I cut some shims that would give me the height I wanted. Now I'm just dry fitting the base plates at this point. I'm going to be marking them off and pulling them out and do the mortise cuts for the balusters. I think you're supposed to use a drill press with these mortise bits, but since I'm just working with a hand drill, it's a two-step process. I drill the holes and then I cut them square using the square bit like a chisel. Not pretty, but it works. Now the tricky part of this was standing up the rails after they've been inserted into the underside of the hand drill. You're going to need a spotter for this move. Thanks, sweetie. There are different methods of attaching handrails to the posts, and I tried these concealable slot fasteners, but I found it was hard to adjust them for a tight fit. So I switched over to the tried and true method, drill and screw. That worked great. Now the finishing touches were next. Some matching trim where the floorboards and the base plates meet. Some stains, some varathane, and more sanding. Looks great. I also had to replace the top stair nosing to transition the wood floor to the carpet stairs. I found the perfect match at my local restore. You know, the Habitat for Humanity building materials outlet. It was a great deal. So the upstairs railings are done. Don't they look great?
Nutritional content that it had when it went into the freeze dryer. So if you pick it out of your garden, blanch it and freeze it, or chop it up and freeze it.
Now it's time to install the stair rails and balusters. A little bit more tricky. You see, the balusters are made to be installed on a base plate parallel to the handrail. The stairs were not built this way. If you remember that the original balusters were mounted directly onto each step, I'm going to have to rebuild the wall at the outside of the stairs. Okay, so the old stair rail edging had to go, and it was replaced with a facing that runs parallel to the new handrail. I had to take into account the width of the new base plate and allow for the eventual drywall patching. Now here I'm painting the stair patch before I install it. This turns out to be a good call because I wouldn't want to be trying to keep paint off the new carpet. Now the posts at the bottom needed to be inserted into the last stair tread. It's important to cut and dry fit everything before fixing it in place. Measure twice, cut once. Now here we are installing the rail posts, and using the same method as we did on the top, we're cutting the balusters in with the drill and mortise. The only difference is that you're drilling it in on a different angle, not the 90 degrees. Now here I am patching and painting drywall, another job that's not my favorite. Drywall patching, that is. And of course some matching trim and screw hole caps to finish it off. Well, there you go, another DIY project done and done. Not quite Stairway to Heaven, but pretty darn close. Anyway, this stairway, it's gone from the 1980s to the 2020s, step by step. And thanks for coming along on this DIY project. Take a second to like and subscribe, and until next time, remember, live your best life.